This January, the state legislature began its 216th legislative session. That means it's a new 2-year cycle of legislative activity. Legislation has already been introduced that's of interest to us as an organization on such important issues as the implementation timelines for Common Core and Park, the use of Park test scores in the evaluation of teachers and principals, full-day kindergarten legislation, teacher preparation legislation, and one of my personal favorites, the elimination of current administrative spending caps in local school budgets. It is also the beginning of state budget deliberations. These past 2 weeks, the Senate and Assembly Budget Committees started hearing public testimony, and PSA's Jennifer Keys-Maloney testified for us. If you look at the digital folders we've given you, you have copies of our testimony as well as access to all the bills I've mentioned and the other bills that have been filed so far this session. Today we're fortunate to have key leaders who sit on the Assembly Education Committee with us, and it's my privilege to welcome them and introduce them to you today. Our first panelist is the esteemed chairman of the Assembly Education Committee, Assemblyman Pat Dykins. He represents Legislative District 18 in Middlesex County, and since it's St. Patrick's Day this week, every good Irishman or woman in the room. Chairman Dykins has served in the Assembly for 12 years. He has held key leadership posts, including that of Deputy Speaker and Parliamentarian. He is an attorney in private practice in South Plainfield, and he is the sponsor of the administrative spending cap legislation. Next is Assemblyman Angel Fuentes, joining us from Camden County. Assemblyman Fuentes has served in the General Assembly since 2009. He currently serves on the Education, Health and Senior Services, and Housing and Community Development Committee. He is Patient Relations Representative for Cooper Health Systems in Camden. And he's been a past speaker at several of our Camden County Principals Association meetings, and we thank him for joining us today. Next is Assemblyman David Reibel, joining us from the beautiful Jersey Shore, representing parts of Monmouth and Ocean counties. Assemblyman Reibel began his service in 2008 in the Assembly, and he has already been chosen by his caucus to serve as Assembly Republican Conference leader. He is a former Wall Township police officer and captain and president of the Belmar Fire Department, and he has introduced some interesting legislation this session concerning limiting the use of standardized tests and addressing confidentiality issues around student test data. And last but not least, we have Assemblyman Troy Singleton from Burlington County's 7th Legislative District. Assemblyman Singleton joined the Assembly in 2011, and I don't think he's stopped moving since. He serves on the Assembly Education and Budget Committees. He's Vice Chairman of Assembly and Tourism and Gaming Committees, and he is a member of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters, Local 255. He has also been engaged at the county level with our members, and we thank him for that. And his legislation of interest this session so far has been legislation concerning school choice, teacher preparation, and legislation concerning an extended school day school year. So at this point, it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to Mr. John Mooney. He is the founding editor of New Jersey Spotlight, a public policy website you should all check out. He has been a 15-year reporter on New Jersey education issues, and if any of you are driving home on your commute and you put on NPR, you can often hear John talking about education in New Jersey. I'll turn this over to John.
Thanks, Debbie. Hello, everyone. Oh, wow, loud. Okay. Are we good? Okay. Can everyone hear me all right? Yep. Great. Really glad to be here, and thank you, Debbie, and principals and supervisors for inviting me and holding this every year. This is, I really, one of the beauties is the real news value of these events. Obviously, early today with Senate President Sweeney and then the folks talking both from inside New Jersey and nationally about Park is, real live news that's facing not just the schools and yourselves, but families and children, and something that Spotlight likes to cover, and hopefully other media will pick up as well. One of the other great things about it is I get to ask, or I get to moderate these panels, and then I get to ask some of the questions. I think your questions have been great, but if I'm up here and I go, well, I want to say something here. So here I'm actually, they give me a mic and let me ask them the questions, and in this case to assembly members who really are some of the leaders in the legislature on education issues. And I also want to commend Principal and Supervisors Association for its engagement in these issues. They're really a leader for myself as a reporter to go to find out information and to really dig down into it, not just through these types of events, but all the classes they have and the folks who work in the State House as lobbyists. Myself and Deb spoke yesterday about speaking of their engagement. We talked about some of the topics we wanted to go over today. I think this year they took it to a new level. I got a 4-page issue paper of the topics they want to go over today. So complete with suggested questions and the like. And so I kudos to you for that. It certainly helps the task. So let's get to it. I've one of the themes I want to touch on with these folks in broader themes is as a reporter who's covered education for, I think it's close to 20 years now. I sort of see where we're standing now, at least in the Christie era, and more of a timeline as opposed to necessarily his situations. But in a phase 2, the first term was very much about setting out policy and putting out a vision. And getting a lot of that enacted. Obviously, Teach NJ was a big case of it. Now, in the second term, and with a new commissioner who actually came in the second term of Christie Whitman as well, in a very similar role. In that case, David Hesby replaced Leo Klagholz. Here, he replaces Chris Serb. But where it's going to be much more about making these things happen in the schools, the implementation of all these ideas. I'm not sure we're going to see a whole lot new out of the administration. They seem to be a little distracted lately. But there may be some new, but I still, and the governor has even said this himself, that this is really about getting these things happening in the schools and making them work and getting through where no doubt are going to be some glitches along the way. So I want to talk about some of those issues. And I'd be remiss not to start with what has dominated the discussion so far today in terms of HARC and Common Core and how that's going to affect evaluations of principals and teachers. There's a fair amount of angst in the room, I'll admit it. I was, I don't know if any of you think you were on the record, but I may come up to you afterwards because I think some of the comments were pretty powerful. And I'll start with Assemblyman Deignan, who as chair of the Assembly Education Committee. I don't know if you were able to hear it, but there seems to be some concerns about the pace of change with PARC coming on in the Common Core and how that's going to affect teacher and principal evaluations starting next year out of the gate. Your thoughts on that? Is that happening at a pace you're comfortable with? Is there much the legislature can do about it? Talk a little bit about some of these real significant changes in assessment and evaluation that are coming down the pike.
First of all, let me compliment John. I mean, in this era where newspapers are no longer, on everybody's front porch in the morning and folks are not getting information, he is an invaluable asset to the state of New Jersey.
Not going to be any nicer, too, because of
And
that.
I just want to be certain nobody from the state police are taking pictures.
I did bring my camera.
I think about this all the time because everywhere you go. In fact, I was in court recently and a judge said, "So when are you going to stop with the testing?" It's and I was joking with a friend of mine. How in the world did folks of my generation get an education without all of these testing and standards? And every week somebody's coming up with a new one. Now there was somebody that made a proposal about somehow calculating parents' involvement in tenure. I couldn't figure out how that would work. I honestly, and I spoke a while in JC on this, and I was supposed to be here with Jim. That's the family. She's a terrific person. I think it's time that we slow down some of this implementation. I think it's time that we take a look at where exactly we're at. And I do not in any way, shape, or form cast aspersions on the governor or former Commissioner Cerf. I think everybody's intentions are good. They really, truly are trying to improve education. But I've said this before, everybody's looking for a magic bullet, like one test that is going to determine the adequacy of education and teachers. There's no such thing. You know what, you folks on the front line, it's, and I hate to use the analogy, it's a bad one, but it's kind of like pornography, when you see it. Well, you know a good teacher when you see it. You know a good administrator when you see it. And it's not necessarily the person that gets the best test results in their classroom. If you've heard me say this, you're going to have to hear it for about the 400th time. My favorite teacher in high school was my French teacher, Mr. Stern, and I got a C in French. I used to look for, I can still sing the French national anthem. If you want to hear it, David's heard about it. He usually challenges me to sing it, but I'm not going to do it. So this is complicated stuff. And the thing that I find to be a little bit disturbing is, I don't think you folks have been involved in the process the way you should have. And I think that has to change. Rather than guessing at what's appropriate, rather than imposing what you think is appropriate. And we did that with the 10-year reform. We did that with the 10-year. We put everybody at the table. And I think if we got a good result. Is it a perfect bill? No. Are some things being imposed that we never intended? Yes. But I think overall we improved the product. So that's just my whole, we can go into details. But I think we really have to do, I hear it everywhere I go, and I heard it today. Folks are confused as to the hardware they're supposed to purchase. I've been told that says when they download it, sometimes it doesn't even work. So one district told me they spent $700,000 so far on the necessary computer technology. This is big stuff, and we really got to.
Let me, before certainly we can go into some detail, but when you talk about slowing down, are we talking about legislation? Or are we talking? How do you do so from your point of view? I'll give you my own sense of the Department of Ed. I don't sense them really wanting, wanting to slow it down. They want to get into it.
What's the date? It's what, May 15th?
Well, they're starting the field test next week, and then the live test will be. So yeah, this is happening now. Is that?
I think it will require legislation. Actually, that's what Mila is working on. I am certain it will require legislation.
And you see some support for that?
I know I support it. I know we've had discussions. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Dave has concerns about it also. So.
Okay. All right. Senator Fuentes, you want to speak to your own sense on this?
Sure. We're looking for a clock this morning, afternoon.
Afternoon, right? Afternoon by 1 minute.
Okay. I was about to say, top of the morning to you. Look on the tools, Mr.
Let me tell you the true Irish folks here. When somebody says top of the morning to you, what's the correct response?
And the rest of the day to you.
You okay? Rest of the day to yourself. Wherever you
Remember me.
I said it in a Puerto Rican accent. It passed. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having us back here to have a discussion. Hopefully we can learn and move forward, with some concrete recommendations. To be quite honest, I do have some concerns regarding this legislation, and I agree with my colleague that we need to sort of put the brakes. When I just walked in, and I was here for 5 minutes listening to one of the principals, and he said out of 400 students, and I believe he has to evaluate close to 90 teachers, if I'm not mistaken. That's overwhelming. So not just for one, I'm sure for many of the principals and supervisors, it is overwhelming because it's different. It's not just you come in and observe the teacher and then from there evaluate that teacher. It's a huge spectrum. I'm concerned that we have over 100, probably more, from schools. So what's going to happen to those teachers? We have some great teachers in those failing schools. So what's going to happen to those good teachers? I'm concerned about the special needs teachers. Oftentimes they don't have all the resources, and yet they'll be evaluated just like anyone else. So what's going to happen to those teachers? When it comes to special needs students, it really doesn't take within 6 months or a year to see some growth. So I agree that we need to sort of put the brakes. I agree that, every child deserves a quality education, no matter what zip code. Although I live in the city of Camden, we have had our problems in Camden City, and of course in other inner cities throughout the state of New Jersey. So I am concerned. I think that we're in a path that we can make some corrections, and we want to do it jointly, with you, the NJDA, and then of course, with us legislators. So I'm concerned even, that the second year, you have to be either an effective or highly effective, right? To not be penalized as a teacher. So I did see the points, even if you make it, I believe, 2.48, that's not considered as effective. Just by another point it becomes effective. So it is. I'm trying to learn more about the evaluations. At first it sounded great, a level of accountability, it's always been there. But to this magnitude, I think we really need to put a brakes. So, thank you.
Let me just, for my own clarity here, the law, and I think Senator Dagnan, you were the sponsor of the Assembly version, the law requires that each NJ go into effect this year. And that, I think, are you talking at all about some flexibility in that?
No.
Okay, you're talking about the testing component as a piece of it.
And that was one, if you folks remember, that was one of the big debates that was going on when we did the tenure reform, was what role would testing have in the evaluation? And I can tell you, as the primary sponsor in the Assembly, we hard stood our ground that it should not be an essential element, just that one factor. Now it appears that after the law is passed, they're attempting to rewrite it to make testing a more significant portion than we ever anticipated.
Well, I think the language is not a predominant factor.
Correct.
And that predominant is, as learned, is very loosely defined. As long as it's not dominant, it's not predominant. So anyway.
But they want to determine it. I mean, that was one of the issues that we had huge debate about. And trust me, as the primary sponsor, it was not our intention that it should be an overwhelming factor as it is now in Congress.
Senator Rival, I think you have some bills. I think you described having some bills that speak to some of these issues. You want to describe some of the things that you specifically want to try to address?
Sure. First, I just want to thank you for having me here. It's my first year on the Education Committee, so I'm really looking forward to it. Working with leadership of Senator Dagnan, who's really, truly is a great statesman, great person. He had the Education Committee. In fact, probably the only person legislators who use pornography in a sentence and not get reprimanded. But, one of the big issues I have in my district and statewide that I get a lot of talk about is the Common Core is, when you hear Common Core to a lot of parents, it's boogeyman. There's a lot of confusion out there. There's misunderstanding. There's people who want to get legislation to end it, get rid of it. 45 states have signed on, and here we are. My issue is, it's a broad brush in a sense where if you look at New Jersey, I think we have some of the finest schools, some of the finest teachers, and some of the greatest output from our children. I think we could be the example for other states for what we do. But when you look at what's, I think it's where I was going with the fear of the Common Core is, as I said, a lot of people come to my office to meet with me, parents. I bring it to like Obamacare. There's been folks in D.C. fighting for years to eliminate Obamacare. It's here. We just got to work to make sure people don't get hurt with it. Same thing with Common Core. It's here. Let's adapt it to how it's going to work best for New Jersey. And I agree with the chairman when we talk about initiatives to maybe slow things down so we get it right. Sometimes here in New Jersey we move a little too fast, and it's not right. So we make this is critical. We are taking a very critical step with Common Core, which is why I've introduced legislation on the testing. And let me be clear, I want teachers to teach. If a teacher wants to give a quick spelling bee, wants to have a quick quiz on the history they talked about during that week, God bless them, do it all day. The standardized testing has got to be evaluated. And when we talk about it, as I said, my bill may never make it to the committee for a hearing, unless we know somebody. But, but we need to have a discussion, and that's why I've created a discussion. And I, through op-eds and through meetings with people all around the state, we're creating a discussion now, and people are not talking about it more. How's it affecting our children? How's it affecting the teachers? Someone Fuentes brings up a great point, special needs. We've got our severely disabled children. We're going to subject them to PARCC testing? I mean, God bless the special ed teachers that want to spend a day in the classroom just to make their days better. Oh, and by the way, you're going to prepare them for a major standardized test. It's just there's a lot of disturbing issues with the testing, and it's just something that I'm looking forward to, hopefully with our committee, with the Department of Education, just trying to see what to do to make this thing better. Our children, as I said in an education hearing recently, when we talked about Common Core, I don't think any of us would want to be a kid today growing up. With the social media, the bullying, the world of the haves and have-nots, the drugs, the alcohol, and testing. But by the way, what are we doing to our kids? And that's my concern. I don't have all the answers, but our job as legislators is to bring the topic up and discuss it. And that's what I look forward to doing with you folks, Commissioner of Education, the NJA, everybody. And parents, most importantly. We have to get everybody at the table. So that, as far as my thing with Common Core is, it's here. Let's try to adapt it. Let's try to make it best for us. And I think there's ways we can do that. There's enough smart people in the rooms around here to make it best for our children.
As the Republican member of this panel, speak to how the administration is, going to address this. I mean, there has not been a lot of wiggle room out of the administration, at least of late, in terms of trying to slow down some of the pieces of this. Have you had any reaction to your bills come from the corner office, or are Republicans in lockstep on this by any stretch?
As far as my caucus is concerned, I think this is definitely a bipartisan issue. We've heard it so many times, bipartisan. It's definitely a bipartisan issue. There's a lot of members in my caucus who support the idea. I haven't really aggressively tried to get other members of the legislature on the bill. So I haven't been doing a drive on that, but more of a drive on trying to get the feedback from people and parents. More importantly, I haven't heard anything from my office.
Oh, really? Okay.
So maybe that is a good thing or a bad thing. But at the end of the day, I think, I think anybody's open to discussion. I think that's what we have to have. We've got to create the discussion now, not later.
Yeah, I mean, this is happening now, and I guess, I'll go to Assemblyman Singleton, maybe speak this a little. I mean, these folks are sitting here saying, well, the legislators are saying this, and Sweeney said this, and, maybe there's a chance this will slow down, but I still got to do my job, and I still got field testing on Monday, and gearing up, and I got 90 evaluations to do, and so on and so forth. Some of them tied to test scores, some not. Is something going to happen on this that changes their minds, that they're on a path, or is this going to be a lot of talk for a while and discussions, and maybe there'll even be a task force to address it, but speak to their lives out there.
First and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a privilege to be here. To answer John's question directly, I am very candid and very blunt in how I speak, so I will be very candid and blunt with you when we talk today. I don't see an implementation that's going to slow down. So let me be fair. I don't think that we are going to see that. I think we as legislators, I could associate myself with each of the comments you've heard here. But at the end of the day, our process is pretty simple. 41 of us, at minimum, will vote for one thing to move it forward and slow it down. 21 of our Senate colleagues will be in the same position, and then the governor has to sign it. And there has been some areas of compromise when it comes to education policy, and there's been areas of disagreement. And I, for one, I think that if we're being honest with each other and being honest in our discussions, that we're going to aggressively try and say that this process probably needs to be slowed down. The silence that we are hearing from the front office, whether intentional or unintentional, and I don't subscribe motive to either, why it is or isn't, I think tells us that they want to see this process evolve, to see if it is working, if it can work. Principals and supervisors, and some in the room know of my family's history in education. I think many folks think that you all just get it done, to be honest with you. I think they think we're just going to get it done. And what we as legislators, when we hear from parents, and when they come to us, and I don't want to associate myself with my friend Dave Riley when he said this, is that parents are oblivious, or not oblivious, parents don't really understand the Common Core piece. And let me start from a fundamental point. I don't think that the process of us having a national standard of education is a bad thing. I really don't, and I don't think that. The implementation is always the key, but for us to have a national standard of education is not, in my opinion, a bad thing. The bad part of it, though, is that you get this small little incubator group of people in Washington, D.C. who decided that this was the process we were going to take. And it did not involve a lot of thoughtful leadership and a lot of conversation with a lot of folks who are implementers and who are on the ground trying to deal with it. So you see a product that comes out that you look to last fall, the Gallup poll said most folks didn't even know the Common Core from the Common Cold. Couldn't tell you the difference. And that's troubling. And that's troubling in a very real, sincere way because it has such a profound impact on our next generation of kids and our ongoing children that we have in our school system. So, I can sit here and tell you that the world is going to change and we're all going to beat our drums and it's going to happen. And it might. And the Lord, as I'm sitting here, I hope I'm wrong. But I've only been in Trenton since 2011 as elected official. I had a little bit of time before that when I was a staff member, when I was there. And I will tell you, I think we were going to say we want to stop this, and it's going to be a meaningful thing. Everyone here is going to mean it. But I think in truth that it probably will not be stopped until we see some semblance of how it's working. If the wheels fall off, then everyone will be up in arms and they'll try and stop it, which unfortunately my old boss, Joe Roberts, used to tell me all the time. He always used to say that I'd rather pilot something, P-I-L-O-T, rather than pilot on P-I-L-E-I-T. And I didn't know I needed to spell it for this crowd. And the idea simply behind that is that it's better to just look at something in a small sample size to determine whether or not it can work before you add on all this stuff and now you're caught sort of trying to unravel different pieces of it as you go on. And that's, I think, our collective frustration is that we hear it on the front lines as well as you do. Because when the parents talk to you and they yell at you about this, that, or the third, or why my kid isn't doing that, trust me, we get the same emails and phone calls. Because they're like, I elected you not to do stuff like this and to fix this. So that is our challenge. I think we all want to see the brakes slow. I just don't think it's going to happen in the timeline that would be acceptable to many of the men and women in this room.
Maybe Senator Dagnan, I'll just ask you, do you agree? What's your prognosis?
Here is the dynamic that happens in Trenton every day of the week. We can't move this bill forward because the governor's going to veto it. So why should we not move it forward? If he vetoes it, then he vetoes it, and we have to deal with it accordingly. But it's always my feeling that we should at least do what we think is right. I know Troy feels the same way. And I think there is a consensus on both sides of the aisle here that should this be abandoned? No, it's not going to be abandoned. I don't want to mislead you. But should the implementation be made more rational? Yes, and I think there is a consensus on it. So I
You think it will?
I think there's a good chance that legislation will pass, yes.
Yes or no, Senator, I do this once in a while, I do the roll call. Senator Fuentes, yes or no, do you think a bill will pass?
If you can get the governor to become a teacher for a day, I think it will reconsider. I have to be very optimistic, so I'm going to say yes. That's all I think.
Senator Ryder?
Can I abstain?
First thing, yellow button. Listen, I think we in our side of the minority, we don't have the ability to push the agenda. I think if the bill comes before the assembly, I think you'll see Republicans support it.
Let me jump to, and it's interrelated, some of the funding issues, and we can go a few places with this. Obviously, there's a lot of questions whether or why there hasn't been any funding to help schools address some of the requirements of Teach NJ. I know Senator Dagnan has a bill that would loosen the cap on administrative spending, which would obviously allow districts some flexibility in trying to address this. The bottom line is we have another level funded budget this year for a lot of reasons. And for the first time, at least under the Christie administration, the school funding formula is not even being run. I mean, basically every district's getting $20, whopping $20. per kid to apply really as they want. It's supposed to go towards park technology, but it really can go anywhere. Speak to, is there any prayer for additional funding out there? Where is the school funding formula in our lives now? I mean, are we moving further and further away from it, or is it going to be another administration that brings it back to bear? Talk a little bit about sort of the situation that schools are facing in terms of state funding. Because the bottom line is 80% of districts, probably the vast majority in this room, are not getting as much state aid as they got 4 years ago, and that also included federal stimulus money. But the bottom line is you've had to rely on property taxes as much as ever, with caps on those as well. So that obviously puts a lot of pressure. Talk a little bit about the fate of state aid for schools and where it's headed. I'll start with you.
Put your hands over your ears. I don't think there's going to be any change until we have a new government. At this particular point, I think, to be able to stand up and say, gee, more money is being given towards education and, in history of mankind, and then it's an extra $20 per district. It's a shell game. It's ultimately, everybody in this room knows it's ultimately going to blow up. It's already blowing up in districts. Their class size is up. I don't have to go through all the struggles that are going on. It is a debate. As Bill Clinton said, it's called arithmetic. It is a debate we as a society we have to have. Where they had it in California last year and actually put it on the ballot, put a menu on the ballot. People actually voted to increase taxes to properly fund education. Now California's in a surplus situation. While we can't properly fund education in New Jersey, we have folks that are talking about tax cuts. I know the T word will always come back and bite you when it comes election time, but we have to raise the proper revenue to properly fund our schools. And it's just that simple. We are not doing that today. We are not. Now, we can all debate where we can raise that from, but right now we are not raising ample funds. If we do not get revenue enhancers, as they now call it, because nobody wants to use the T word, if we do not get revenue enhancers, we're not going to be able to meet our obligation. And ultimately, I say this to everybody. I'm a child of the 60s. The revolution that took place in the 60s obviously was based on race, but it was also based on opportunity. When you can't sit at the same restaurant as somebody else, when you can't have the same job as somebody else, when you can't have the same housing as somebody else, you've got to become angry about it. And right now that's happening in this country. We really have to deal with it once and for all. So do I feel anything's going to happen in the immediate future? No.
And are you concerned that the formula is not even being applied at all? I mean, is that...
Ultimately, it's going to be back before the Supreme Court.
Do you see that?
Absolutely. I think David Shearer has already talked about doing it. The court is going to have to, and the court shouldn't be, whether it's COA, whether it's the aid, the court should not be the determiner of these factors. We should be. The governor should be. The legislature. That's what we're here for. But sadly, I think that's what it's about.
Senator Fuentes?
I think you heard it all from my chair. This is my first year education committee, and I believe it's a mandate that we should respect. It's really sad because as legislators, oftentimes we have to sort of think out of the box and be very creative where we'll get these funds. We tried with the millionaire's tax. You got to give them the T. You could talk about the tax credits. Particularly corporations should help fund some of the programs. It could be kindergarten, making it full time. But I think that I'm a strong believer that when it comes to education, which is a right, we should really bend backwards to help you, to help the teachers, and to help our students. That's the bottom line, and I agree. There's no need for us to go as far as the Supreme Court. This is something that we should be our basic principle, fundamental principle, because if we don't take a proactive role, I'm saying we, the legislator and the governor, then we're failing you. I'm being quite honest. And you can look at, you know, in the United States where we rank when it comes to education, and globally where we rank, you know, when it comes to education. So I think we need to be really upfront, sincere. This has to be a priority when it comes to education. And let me tell you, when I was council president for the city of Camden, you know, when you hear the numbers of truancies, of dropouts, of school violence, and it's concerning, you know. Unfortunately, when I was the council president, I have no choice but to subpoena, you know, the superintendent and the principal and then the president of the school board, so that we can work jointly to help our children in the city of Camden. And you know, Troy is right. When it comes to Common Core, a lot of parents really don't understand. And so I think we have a responsibility, you as well as us, you know, to educate, now we educate our parents, and then for them to take a proactive role, you know, in helping their children in the decision making. So we can become very creative, but I think the bottom line, we have to be responsible and we have to be honest, and then really set our priorities.
Let me follow up with you, just speaking of Camden, in the news a little bit these days in terms of its schools. A district that spends, depends how you do the math, but $25,000 a student. Some say it's, you know, actually is considerably higher when in fact you know, factor in the use of surplus funds and the like. Is your concern that not enough is being spent, or it's how it's distributed? I mean, speak to it. I think they're probably among the higher spending districts in the state. You got to be. You know, you know, this is obviously at the heart of Abbott versus Burke as well. But you know, speak to that. Is 25 not enough in Camden? Is it how it's getting spent in Camden? I mean, now that the state is running it, has that changed anything? You know,
you're there. I had two conversations with the new superintendent. But first, to answer your question, is 25 enough? Absolutely. Yeah, I believe out of 600 school districts, we are probably one of the highest, you know, in the state. And that's why I was compelled, you know, to get the superintendent and the president. I said, what's going on? You know, we need to know what's happening within your institution. You know, as a local government, you know, we need to play a role. And they, you know, you always would have the separation of the two institutions. And I said, you know what, enough is enough. You know, you have parents come to city council voicing their concern. You have some just tears. And I felt that we needed to act, and we did. You know, we ended up in this court. The judge made it clear. The superintendent and the president have to come and meet with us. If not, they would have been held in contempt. So you know, most of you know that I was in the forefront of trying to come up with some type of reform, not just for Camden City, but all these film schools throughout the state of New Jersey. And I'm sure some of you were not too happy in respect to the, you know, what I supported, you know, for the tax credits, of course, you know, trying to really see what we can do for our children. But I just couldn't see these parents come to me and saying, what are you going to do with my kid? You know, what are you going to do with my child? Do I have any hope, you know, what developed, what transpired this last 5-6 months? I would hope so. I really would hope so. You know, because every child deserves a quality education, and not just in Camden, but throughout the state. So we'll see what happens, you know, come June in the next year, because I'm going to be very tough with the superintendent, you know, to see if it's really meeting the expectations of the parents, yes, our students, and yes, our teachers. Not to put, you know, again, it's just early in the game, you know, I also supported the Urban Hope Act as a prime sponsor, but that's to have a relationship, you know, for the board member to decide, do you want, you know, a Renaissance school or not, you know, and for example, in Camden, Trenton, if not even in Newark. So just to have some conversation back and forth. But I'm not going nowhere in respect to Camden City, you know, and I hope that this superintendent would have a good working relationship with administrators, principals, and to see what we can do in Trenton, to help them. So,
Senator Rival, on the budget issue, state aid, again, you're the lucky Republican at the table. But, speak to, some of the issues on that side of the aisle and how to address. There's a lot of angst over, another year of level funding. Obviously, there's a lot of pension pressures that are driving that. But, give us your take and what you sense is your caucus's take on where the budget situation is going for schools.
I think, I agree with Chairman Diden. I think we need to get school funding back to us. The Supreme Court has strangled the taxpayers of the state of New Jersey, literally strangled by ordering $500 million extra funding. The Supreme Court is continuing to over-legislate from the bench and tell us how we need to spend money. My former district, District 11, I had 3 former Abbott districts, Asbury, Neptune, and Long Branch, getting somewhere up to almost $30,000 a student. Now, if you drove through Asbury Park, you want to know where the hell your money went. At least in Long Branch and Neptune, you see the schools, you see the students, you see a lot of great prospering children, a lot of productivity. Asbury is a failing school district, but because of the Supreme Court, we still continue to have to spend that money. So, to the governor's defense, the $500 million extra funding, a tremendous amount of money that can go into schools that can use to help. The governor's been trying to get good people, as the governor has the right, Governor Christie has the right to make his fix in the Supreme Court. The Senate's not moving his nominees, and that's what's holding up our school funding. Until, who's going to bring a knife to a gunfight? Until the people are there, they're going to make a decision that's going to support the taxpayers in a better school funding formula. We're never going to get it out of the courts until the right people are there to get it out and send it back to us.
Senator Singleton, are you on the budget committee? Yeah. Speak, you're going to be asking these questions, and the committee is, clashed with the administration in the past on not using the funding formula, and this year they're not even running it. Where are we headed on that? And I also, as he answers this, we're going to start taking questions from the audience if you have them, so either can walk up to the mic or just wave your hand and I'll call on you, but go ahead.
First and foremost, I think the school funding formula, the governor's made it clear that he does not support it, so I'm not surprised that it was not run. It's a pretty understandable equation. The governor has worked hard over the course of the last several years and has made it a point to talk in public about wanting to change the school funding formula. I will tell you, from education experts who I've had the pleasure of working with on our Citizens Advisory Council in my district, as well as education leaders from around the country who had the opportunity to be in front of and listen to, they've actually held up our school funding formula as a model for other states to utilize. The difficulty we face is that it's not been fully funded. It hasn't, under any circumstance, been fully funded. And that's not subscribed to whether it was Governor Corzine toward the end or Governor Christie. So we don't even know whether or not, if it was to be fully run, what the educational outcomes could be and should be associated with it. But my concern, first and foremost, is that we're getting to this position where we're sort of pitting our neighbors against each other. So our neighbors who live in Camden, and I'm from Burlington County, which is right next door, and I represent one of the more affluent communities in our state, Morristown. So our neighbors in Morristown look down upon our folks in Camden because they say, well, I'm paying, and all of us are paying to educate their kids. And we get this sort of tension that evolves that underscores the basic premise of public education, which is someone paid for me. It wasn't just someone who paid for me who lived in Wallenboro where I grew up. It was someone paid for me. Just like someone paid for you, someone paid for my father, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, so that they can have an opportunity to grow and be better people. And for me, when we walk away from that basic premise and we get to this sort of back and forth about, who's getting too much money and who's not, I agree. I think the bottom line is the amount of money should not dictate how well we're educating our kids. And I think anyone who represents any of those areas, as Senator Rival pointed out, which makes sense, is that whether it costs $10,000, $5,000, or $30,000, the quality of the education is what matters, not the price tag that's associated with it. And I think many of us, if we're being honest, we would say that in some areas where we're spending an enormous amount of money per student, we're not getting the results we need. And if we're not getting those results, then we need to go in and figure out how we can do that better. But that does not mean, at the same token, that we turn around and say that those kids, because I love when folks go with those kids, like those kids in certain areas, they're less worthy of consideration because it costs more to educate those kids because of some of the surrounding circumstances. One of the biggest challenges that I see, and it frustrates me, is that so much of this is put on education. So much. No one talks about in my opinion, our systematic consolidation of poverty that is our housing process. No one talks about how our economic development programs steer economic development in certain areas and not others. And maybe we've started to do that differently over the course of the last several years, but historically we haven't done that. You pile all that on, but at the end of the day, someone says, you know what, the real problem is education. And that to me is the frustrating part, because it's all hand in hand. It all wraps around every student that goes through these schools. We had the other day, we had this broad bipartisan support on breakfast after the bell. You know, if my son and daughter's biggest challenge is picking out what uniform they gotta wear, or what they're gonna do after, what program they're gonna be in after school. When I used to work for Speaker Roberts, who represented the city of Camden, we had the challenges, which route do I gotta take to leave my school to get to my house so I can avoid gang A here, or I know there was a shooting on another corner. And Dave's history as a police officer, he knows this well. He knows that the challenges from being in the streets, hands-on, what kids are dealing with. So we can't just bundle it in and just say it's the education problem, because it's not. It's systemic on so many other levels, and we have to do better at addressing that. But the basic premise of how we are funding our schools, Chairman Dykman hit it on correctly. That's a debate we have to not be scared to have. We have to not be scared to have that debate, because it'll evolve in a lot of different things. It may say, you know what, maybe we just need big county school districts. Or maybe, you know what, we don't need to blur the lines with this, you and your kids can only go to this school in this town. If we really want to have an honest and thoughtful debate, everything needs to be on the table. Sacred cows to all of us need to be right there to be discussed. And the funding piece of it, as I said, when it pits our neighbors against each other, it just makes it difficult to have a thoughtful and reasoned conversation about it. So I hope when we're on the budget committee this year, and Commissioner Hespy comes before us, I'm hopeful, even though he wasn't there in the formulation of that budget, we'll be able to talk us through the mechanics and understanding why that funding formula was not run, and what that means materially to the kids' academic education product. And that's going to be a question that many of us will have on both sides of the aisle to figure out.
I want to ask a follow-up, but anyone have a question that they want to, yep, right here.
I've listened to
Here's wait for the mic, just so there's.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ribel, for coming, because I think when you're odd man out a little bit, sometimes it's difficult. You started talking about you're hoping to introduce legislation. Could you tell a little bit more about the legislation you're hoping to introduce? I think it was on testing.
Yeah, I've introduced a piece of legislation that would, talks about standardized testing. As I'm learning, and as most of you in the room are know, that it's really not the state that's saying how many standardized tests can be done. It's the districts that are supplying them. Now, some districts are not doing many standardized tests. They're doing the NJS test, and biology and done. Maybe one of the towns in my district, in my legislative district, is doing upwards of 50 standardized testing benchmarks. So what my legislation would do if it was to be signed by the governor, would allow, if districts want to do additional assessments that are not regulated by the state or federal government, if they want to do additional benchmark standardized testing, they would have to apply to the Commissioner of Education for approval to do those additional tests. So they can still have them, they'd have to get approval from the Commissioner.
So it's not legislation to reduce something,
No, I'm not,
to allow us to,
if you want
as
to,
above and beyond.
if you want to go above and beyond what the state and federal regulations are, you have to get permission from the Commissioner of Education. Now, I'm not saying, again, you want to do a spelling test, you want to do a quiz on history, far out. It's standardized testing. It's the kids that are staying up to 2:30 in the morning crying because they're getting thrown off the curve because they were the smartest kid in the class 3 months ago, and now they're not because they're so smart, they curve their grade down to match the kids that wasn't the smartest kid. That's the concern.
Thank you.
Other questions? Right here.
Good afternoon. Dolores Samansky, one of those temporary superintendents that Speaker Sweeney talked about, interim superintendent in Mount Holly, and one of Assemblyman Singleton's constituents. And you're doing a fine job, thank you. And especially with the question that I'd like to ask, which surrounds school construction. Thank you for your support. Right now, as school districts, we are faced with a number of mandates and increasingly tight budgets. And repairs and school construction are put at the bottom right now. We were very fortunate in Mount Holly right now that we were able to pass a referendum so that our aging schools will be repaired. But all of our schools, either the old schools that have boilers as old as I am and they don't work so well, even the new schools need technology upgrades. What's in the pipeline for bringing funding for school construction and facilities enhancements?
Thank you for your question. One of the challenges that many of us, and frustrations I think many of us have faced, is that our school development authority, which is often charged with helping to coordinate a lot of the construction in our state, has not been as aggressive in doing some of those things. And that's a frustration for us. As we said, I'm a member of the Carpenters Union, so I know a little bit about construction, and our biggest thing is about trying to get things from concept to concrete. And we got a lot of things still in concept, but no concrete's happening, and that's frustrating. And when many of us sort of talk about it, it delves into the secondary part that was said about the governor speaking about the extended school day. And let me be clear, I think it's a great discussion to have. I think we're still educating our kids on the agrarian schedule. I think we probably need to think about whether or not we need to change that. But one component of it, you can't be too aggressive with doing it, because there are schools that just, first of all, just aren't built for the winter or the summer, and you're going to have kids all throughout it. That just won't work. Before you get in all the mechanics beyond that, from a basic facility standpoint, that is a challenge. So it's our hope as we continue through this budget process, the SDA comes in and we'll have a better idea of what their timeline is on getting some schools built. I applaud the citizens of Mount Holly, quite honestly, for recognizing that they will take it upon themselves to try and enhance their school facilities, as many districts have with the votes that they take around the state. But until we have a clear, concise plan to address that, either federally or on the state level, because on the federal level there's a lot of proposals to address that as well, we're still sort of stuck in this malaise. And that malaise oftentimes is because of the dollar. I mean, there are, for that same $1 that's there in state government, we hear from countless groups all chasing for that $1. And it makes it difficult because we are in a situation where we do have a finite amount. It's really a matter of priorities, and if we're being honest, educating our kids and creating the facilities to allow them to achieve and be the best and brightest should be a priority as well. So I'm hopeful when the SDA comes in, we'll have a better understanding of what's in the pipeline and when it will happen. But I can't tell you what it is right now.
My sense is that it has started to loosen a little bit under the new director there, SDA. I don't know, maybe that's, the power of press releases or something, but there seems to be more projects moving through the pipeline.
We're now in year 5. Are any schools under construction?
Under construction, not completed yet.
I mean, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. I mean, we're sitting on over $3 billion. I hope nobody here is from SDA. I always ask the question, I don't know what they do all day. I mean, they have a lot of employees, seriously. All they're doing is some health and safety renovations, which you could have Sears do. I mean, it's really, the whole thing is, it's really, SDA is an outrage.
Subcontract with Sears. Another question, one more? Yeah? I think we only have time for one more, so you guys can fight over that mic.
I just want to ask the committee your perspective on charter schools.
Yes, thank you.
And where you think they're going and the role they play, particularly in areas of poverty.
Then let me add on that. I mean, I think when we were here last year, I asked this question, and I think I even asked, did a roll call of who thought we'd have a new charter school law And I think most people thought we would, and here we are again. Give us a sense briefly on where the prospects for a new law are and what might be included.
Actually, Troy and Mila, JC and I are right now working on, Troy has dropped the bill. We're using the same template that we used with 10-year reform. Troy can talk better about it than me. I am very, very optimistic that we will come to a consensus. My dream is that it would be signed into law before this calendar year is out. At least we have a consensus on a bill before we adjourn. And everybody's approach, nobody's against charter schools. Charter schools are public schools, and they do serve a purpose, especially in our urban areas for choice, etc. But they have to be consistent, they have to be properly authorized, they have to be transparent, they have to be reviewed on an annual basis. The funding mechanism, which has become contentious between the districts and the charters, have to be resolved. I don't think anybody up here is anti-charter school. I know I am not, but it's something that has to be organized. So Troy, you can talk about your bill.
Sure. The chairman's gracious because he has been very thoughtful and allowing me a lot of latitude to have a lot of conversations with a lot of folks on this topic. And our goal, as the chairman said, is to have one proposal that makes its way out in the assembly. That fundamental points that it adheres to are transparency, a strong academic mission to make sure that, and solvency. I think we see a lot of this some charter operators who come sort of fly by night and move in and out. And we are clear in what we're trying to accomplish. And this process is difficult, and many in this room know that because not everyone embraces charter schools. And our approach to it is quite honestly is that they are a part of the paradigm of education, and we want to find a way to make sure that they fit into the educational structure. I will tell you, if we've done our job, you probably will not like significant elements of the bill. And there's going to be charter school people who will not like significant elements of the bill. No one is going to come out of this a complete winner in what we're trying to accomplish. But we recognize that because there are so many strong interests on both sides to advance this education issue. But we're going to continue to meet and have our discussions on it, and we think we're getting close to it. The issues, and I'll just quickly tick a few off that we're working towards, working through the issue of local control and how to wrap those who don't believe local control should be a part of the bill, to have an understanding that there are some who believe it has to be essential in some way for us to move forward, and recognizing the governor's perspective, who ultimately has to sign it, who's made it clear that that's not something that he is prepared to embrace.
So do you have a local vote in your bill or not?
The bill that we're working on, we're still working through that issue. We're still working through that issue.
Because your original did not, and some of the indictments did, if I'm correct.
And that's what we're working through. We actually think we have a pretty unique way of addressing that I wish I could share with you all, but we haven't shared it with
So we're here for it. Come on, this is your kid.
No, we do. No, I'm going to be honest with you. We do think we have a pretty unique way of addressing that we are still working through, but we think right now there is no local input whatsoever in the placement of a charter school, and we feel that we need to have local input in that. What local input means is what we're working towards, and we think we're going to have something that's going to be respectful of those who believe that it has to be paramount, and also respectful of those who know that they want to see the process continue to move forward as well. So that is one of our big issues. Our other big issue is dealing with the demographic issue and making sure that charter schools are reflective of the communities they're in as a traditional public school, and we're working through that issue as well. We made great progress. Assuming JC and her team has been excellent in trying to help us fashion that. So we feel confident, and the chairman has made it clear his goal is to get a bill, at least from the assembly perspective, out of our house, and we can do it before we break for the summer. And we want to. I don't like to disappoint my chairman, so I'm going to do everything I can to help him achieve that goal. Very good.
I just listening and I would hope that I'll be a co-sponsor to that legislation joint. In respect to, I think it sort of hit the nail on the head, because there hasn't been any transparency that I can think of. Once it comes from the state, it's like, Camden, you gotta sort of suck it up. It could even be Cherry Hill, it could even be Lebanon, it could be any city, in the state of New Jersey. There's no input at all, or local with the board members, if you will, of the school district. So I would hope that, just like the Urban Hope Act, the Renaissance School, you would have some local participation and even decision of the board members. And so I think that's charter school, just like the public school, they have to also abide by everything, even the evaluations, if you will. But it has to be in a way that not be a flux of too many charter schools, but only if there's sort of a welcome in that district. I would support.
I think one clarification maybe you can answer. I don't think charter schools do have to follow the evaluation law.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they
Well, they have to evaluate teachers. I don't think they have to, I don't think they follow, I may be wrong.
They follow the same thing that the public schools follow. Yes, they do. As far as evaluation.
I'm not certain. I'm not certain they fall under teach and the same way.
Yes, they do. I work
Senator
with
Robert, you want last word on charter schools? Also last word on,
Just for the sake of time, Troy's tease, that's not a bill, I can't wait to see it as well. But as a committee, I look forward to working together to try to get
Oh,
some
really?
legislation.
well, we ran out of time, we're over, and I apologize for that, but I want to thank the panel for